1792, Kentucky had just become the 15th state of the Union, but in the dense woods of Mercer County, hidden behind crumbling stone walls and crooked fences, a family named Hartwell began a legacy that historians now refuse to speak of. Births without records, deaths without graves, and whispers of children who should never have been born. The candle extinguishes, darkness, silence, then an archival photograph emerges, blurred faces of a rural family, eyes scratched out. Tonight we enter America's most disturbing genetic mystery, a story buried beneath churches, orphanages, and state records, a story that Kentucky itself has tried to erase. The story of the Hartwell family. The screen cuts to black. Title sequence plays, low violin drones, archival scratches, and the words, "The Hartwell Family, America's Most Disturbing Genetic Mystery." Kentucky's statehood was celebrated with bonfires, hymns, and land grabs. But Mercer County was different. Settlers whispered that something was wrong with the soil there. Crops rotted. Livestock wandered into the woods and never returned. The Hartwells arrived that year, purchasing a sprawling tract of land rumored to contain an abandoned Shawnee burial site. Neighbors warned them not to dig, not to build, not to disturb. They laughed off the warnings. Within a decade, strange patterns emerged. The Hartwell children did not play with others. They did not attend school. They walked barefoot even in winter with a strange endurance. Their eyes, a neighbor recalled, looked like glass marbles, like they were seeing something the rest of us could not. Then came the first disappearance. A traveling preacher stayed one night at the Hartwell farm in 1803. He was never seen again. His horse was found tied neatly at the fence. His Bible lay open in the field, pages damp with morning dew. No one investigated. The Hartwells donated generously to the local church. The town turned its head. The first real evidence of the Hartwell secret comes not from the family itself, but from a church ledger discovered in 1891. Buried deep in the basement of St. Elias Seminary, the leather-bound book cataloged baptisms from 1792 to 1830. Most entries are normal, John's, Mary's, Thomas's, but scattered between them, the Hartwells' children appear again and again. No fewer than 11 births in just 2 decades, yet none of these children ever married outside the family. Each baptism notes parents unknown, or lists cousins as guardians. The handwriting becomes increasingly erratic, almost feverish. On one page, the priest had scrawled a warning, "Their blood is not of this earth. Baptism cannot cleanse what is carried in silence." The book was quietly removed from church archives. It surfaced only once in the late 19th century during an academic inquiry into Appalachian folklore. Then it vanished, but the pattern was clear. The Hartwells were not growing. They were multiplying inward, folding upon themselves, generation after generation. The walls of Mercer County were closing in. By the mid-1800s, Kentucky's orphanages were overflowing with unwanted children from cholera epidemics and Civil War casualties. Yet one orphanage, St. Mary's Home for Lost Children, kept a peculiar policy. They never accepted children from Mercer County. Former caretakers recalled why. "We once took in a Hartwell boy." One woman confessed in an interview from 1912. He was 7 years old, pale, silent, but his mouth, when he finally opened it, was full of teeth that didn't belong to a child. The boy was returned to the family within a week. His name was stricken from the records. Local rumors claimed that orphanages across the state circulated secret warnings, "Do not accept the Hartwell children." But who wrote these warnings and how they spread remains a mystery. The Hartwells never complained. They kept their children close, their fences high, and their windows shuttered. The world was not meant to raise their kind. In the county courthouse, there is a gap. Between 1847 and 1863, records from Mercer vanish. Birth certificates, death certificates, marriage licenses. Entire families seem to disappear as if erased. When state archivists were questioned in the 1930s, they simply shrugged. Those records were misplaced, fires, floods, the usual. But elderly townsfolk told a different story. They remembered a fever that swept through, not cholera, not yellow fever, something unnamed. Bodies were buried at night without ceremony. And yet the Hartwells survived untouched. One witness swore she saw Hartwell men digging at the churchyard at midnight, hauling something heavy into wagons, not coffins, but stones, stones carved with crosses, carried back to their land, piled in strange formations. The fever ended, life went on, but the county never spoke of it again. To this day, that missing decade remains one of Kentucky's great archival voids. In 1872, a traveling photographer passed through Mercer County. He offered portraits for families, $1 for a daguerreotype, $2 for a glass plate. Most residents were eager, photographs were rare treasures, the Hartwells agreed, but when the plates were developed, something went wrong. In every frame their eyes appeared blank, not reflections, not shadows, just white voids like glass marbles staring through the image. The photographer, unsettled, refused to deliver the portraits. He destroyed most of them. But one survived. It rests today in a private archive, seldom displayed. Those who have seen it claim the figures are not posing. They are waiting. Their heads tilt at identical angles, mouths closed, hands resting in strange, unnatural symmetry. Art historians dismiss the story as folklore, poor chemistry, overexposure, nothing supernatural. But the photographer's diary, found decades later, tells another story. Their eyes followed me even after I left. For 3 nights I dreamt of their house, a door with no handle, a child's laughter under the floorboards. He burned his equipment. He never took another photograph again. By 1888, whispers of the Hartwells reached St. Elias Seminary, a theological school charged with training young priests. The seminary maintained confidential files on cases of spiritual concern, families exhibiting unnatural patterns of behavior. The Hartwells occupied an entire drawer. The files describe midnight masses conducted without clergy, where the family would gather in the barn and chant in a language no one recognized. Neighbors reported seeing light leaking through the cracks of the wooden walls, flickering as though fire burned inside, but no smoke, no heat. One priest sent to investigate returned after 2 nights, trembling, refusing to speak. He left the order within a month. The seminary closed the file in 1892, marking it unfit for exorcism, recommend silence. No priest would ever again visit the Hartwells. By the turn of the 20th century, the Hartwells were wealthy landowners. Their farm sprawled across hundreds of acres, but the family never sold land, never invited workers, never integrated into the community. Local schools noticed something stranger still. Hartwell children never celebrated birthdays. When asked their age, they hesitated, sometimes offering the wrong number, sometimes not answering at all. Teachers filed complaints, but records show an eerie pattern. Every teacher who questioned the Hartwells left Mercer County within a year. Some vanished entirely. One teacher's journal was found years later in a hollow Doubt Bible. The final entry read, "They asked me to visit the farm, said they wanted to show me the roots of the family. I went. I will not go again. No child should crawl on all fours like that." The journal ends abruptly, no signature, no return. In 1907, Dr. William Ellsworth, a physician from Louisville, began investigating genetic disorders in rural Kentucky. His goal was academic, to trace rare conditions caused by isolation and intermarriage. The Hartwells fascinated him. He corresponded with the family, gained permission to conduct interviews, and even took blood samples. His notes reveal excitement, almost obsession. Their blood reacts strangely to sunlight. The samples darken faster than any I've studied. The children, quiet, intelligent, but always watching me as though I were the specimen. Then, silence. Ellsworth never published his research. He disappeared after his 3rd visit to Mercer County. His horse and carriage were discovered in a ravine. His satchel lay nearby, bloodied. Inside, police found only one scrap of paper. They are not evolving. They are remembering. The Hartwells denied seeing him. No charges were filed. During World War I, Kentucky sent hundreds of young men to Europe, but not a single Hartwell enlisted. Draft boards received exemption letters signed by doctors who could not be located, citing hereditary illness. Meanwhile, strange activity increased on the farm. Locals swore they saw bonfires burning on the hill, not in celebration but in patterns arranged in circles. Soldiers who returned from France avoided Mercer County altogether. When asked why, one veteran muttered, "The Hartwells are older than this country, older than the church. They don't fight wars because the wars are fought for them." By the 1920s, Mercer residents rarely spoke the family's name. The Hartwell farm was marked on maps, but travelers were told to take the long road around. The family had become a wound in Kentucky's soil, a wound that never healed. In 1923, Kentucky's Department of Public Health conducted a census of rural families afflicted by genetic illness. But when the Hartwell farm was reached, the agents refused to submit their findings publicly. Years later, fragments of their report surfaced under the title "The Black Record." Most pages were heavily redacted, but what remained was chilling. Subject family displays systematic concealment of internal procreation. No external marriages for 4 generations. Several members exhibit striking craniofacial abnormalities, heightened sensory awareness, and disturbingly, unnatural symmetry in behavior. They sit, stand, and rise in unison, almost rehearsed, almost ritualistic. The report was stamped, classified "Do Not Distribute." Historians believe this was one of the first times the state recognized the Hartwells not as a curiosity but as a threat. Yet rather than intervene, the government buried the record. Why? Perhaps because silence was easier than confrontation. Or perhaps because the Hartwells were already too deeply entangled with those in power. In 1928, several Hartwell children were admitted to the Kentucky State Hospital for the Insane in Danville. Their condition was recorded as catatonic mutism. They did not speak, did not resist, did not blink for hours. Nurses, however, reported something stranger. At night, the children whispered, not in English, not in any known language. They whispered in unison, words that echoed down the ward and froze staff in place. Doctors attempted electroshock therapy. The children laughed, not loudly, softly together, the sound like rustling leaves. Within 6 months, all records of their stay were expunged. The children were released back to Mercer County under family custody. The hospital staff who worked that ward, at least 3, later killed themselves. Each left behind a note with nearly identical wording. The voices follow even in silence. In 1931, the Mercer County schoolhouse burned to the ground, killing 7 children. Official reports cite a faulty lantern, but survivors tell a different story. One teacher, badly burned but alive, claimed she saw Hartwell children standing outside the blaze, untouched, watching. Their faces did not flinch. Their clothes were unmarked by ash. They weren't trapped. They weren't even afraid. They were waiting, like they'd lit the fire themselves. The county sheriff dismissed her testimony, but families began withdrawing their children from school, terrified of sharing classrooms with the Hartwells. Within a year, the school was rebuilt, but the Hartwell children were no longer welcome. They returned to their farm, educated only by their own. The town exhaled in relief for a while. By the mid-1930s, whispers of the Hartwells reached beyond Kentucky. Folklorists, eugenicists, even journalists came sniffing for stories of the cursed family of Mercer. But again and again their work was silenced, articles pulled from print, university papers buried, careers destroyed. One folklorist from Chicago left a final note in his diary before disappearing. "I went to Mercer. I spoke to them. Their genealogy stretches back further than America, further than the crown, further even than the tribes who walked here first. They told me something no man should hear. I will not write it, I will not speak it, but know this, the state protects them because the state belongs to them." His body was never recovered. The winter of 1938 was the coldest Mercer had seen in decades. Farms failed, livestock froze in the fields. But the Hartwells thrived. Neighbors swore smoke never rose from their chimneys, yet the family grew fat while others starved. Then screams began echoing across the valley, night after night, between midnight and dawn. Not the screams of pain, but of something else, ritual, frenzy, ecstasy. One farmer, driven mad by the sound, tried to storm the Hartwell land with a rifle. He was never seen again. His wife found only the weapon, bent clean in half, lying at the property line. By spring, several families abandoned their farms. Mercer's population dropped by nearly half in a single year. The Hartwells remained stronger than ever. By 1941, Mercer County was a ghost. Farms stood empty, fields untended, churches boarded shut. Those who remained avoided the Hartwell farm entirely. Then, something happened that sealed Mercer's fate. On a Sunday morning in June, the bells of St. Elias Seminary rang out across the valley. The sound was wrong, metallic, distorted, as though echoing underwater. When neighbors arrived to investigate, the seminary was deserted, pews overturned, hymnals burned, every crucifix split down the middle, but the strangest discovery lay in the basement, rows of children's shoes arranged neatly in a circle. No bodies, no names, just the shoes. Within weeks, the county sheriff declared Mercer unsafe. Families were relocated, records were sealed. By the end of the year, Mercer had ceased to exist on most maps. But the Hartwells stayed. Always the Hartwells stayed. 3 years later, the Hartwell farmhouse went up in flames. Witnesses swore they saw the fire from miles away, a column of black smoke twisting into the sky. Yet when firefighters arrived, they found no heat, no ash, just an empty foundation, and the family was gone. No bodies were recovered, no graves dug. It was as if the earth itself had swallowed them. But in the weeks that followed, strange sightings spread across Kentucky. Travelers reported pale figures standing at the roadside, silent children wandering the woods, a farmhouse door appearing where no house had ever stood. The Hartwells had not perished, they had dispersed, and Kentucky became their hiding ground. In 1947, the federal government conducted what it called a resettlement survey of abandoned Kentucky counties. Among the files, one folder bore a single word, Hartwell. Most of the pages were blank. The few that survived bore cryptic notes. Family lines persist. Recommend surveillance, not eradication. Genetic study discontinued. Risk too great. Subjects display memory beyond generational limits. The file closed with one final statement, underlined twice, containment preferable to confrontation. The folder was sealed. To this day, it has never been reopened. In 1950, a Kentucky folklorist named Samuel Hargrove managed to obtain a wire, recording allegedly made at the Hartwell farm before its destruction. The tape, now stored at an unnamed archive, has been played only twice. Those who heard it describe voices, not singing, not praying, but layered whispers, dozens speaking at once in a tongue that does not exist. Underneath the voices, a sound pulses steadily, like a heartbeat, but too slow, too deep. Hargrove himself refused to discuss the recording. His final letter, written weeks before his disappearance, reads, "It is not music, it is not language, it is a remembering. I believe now what others feared to say. The Hartwells were not born here, they were placed." The recording remains locked away. Officially, it does not exist. Today, the Hartwells are gone. Their farm is overgrown, their town erased, their name scrubbed from most state records. And yet, the silence around them is louder than their presence ever was. Historians who dig too deep are warned off. Families who trace their genealogy back to Mercer find their papers missing, their names crossed out, and sometimes, when the wind is right, locals claim they hear it again. A hum in the trees, a whisper at the edge of the field, the sound of children laughing where no children play. Do not look into their eyes. The old saying goes, for if you do, you will not see them. You will see yourself, remembered in ways you were never meant to be. The documentary closes on the blurred photograph of the Hartwell family, their eyes scratched white, their faces waiting, black screen. One last line appears, the Hartwell bloodline has not ended, it has only hidden.